Hello, my crafty Kakana friends. This is Sarah at the Kakana Public Library, and I'm here to show you another crochet video. So, like I mentioned in part 2, which you can find on our YouTube channel along with part 1, I am going to show you how to do some increasing and decreasing stitches today, which is helpful for when you are shaping accessories or garments, when you need to add more stitches or take away stitches for any reason as called for in your pattern or just in your imagination. So I'm going to start with in single crochet showing you an increase. So I've got my little bit of single crochet here, and I'm just at the beginning of a new row. So I'm going to go part way across my row, a few stitches in, though oftentimes patterns will have you increase in the first stitch. But I'm just going to go a little bit in a ways. Now increasing is pretty easy. You just make 2 stitches into the same stitch. So let's say I need to add a stitch in this next stitch here. So I'm going to go ahead and make 1 stitch, and then I'm going to go back into that same stitch that I just went into and make another stitch. So you can see in that one space there are 2 stitches coming out of it. So I can go another couple of stitches over. And do another increase if I want. So here's the stitch. I'm going to go in, make 1 stitch, go back into that same space, and make another one. And you can usually see in that space, you'll see the legs of your stitch in there, so you can see that you've already worked it, so you know where to put your next stitch. I'll do another increase here in this next one. So there's my next stitch. I'll make a normal stitch in there. You can see my little stitches legs. Go back into that same space and do another one. And then I can finish off my row here. And so I have increased 3 stitches over the course of that row. And you can see it's already, even just with 1 row, starting to change the shape of my little swatch here. It's starting to kind of make that top curve over like a rainbow because there are more stitches in it. So if we continued to do that, we would continue to have more of that curvature as we worked our way up, doing our increases, which can be a handy thing for, a sleeve. Maybe you want it narrow at the cuff and you want it wider up at the top. You might create those increases as you go to shape that sleeve. So now we're going to turn around and decrease in single crochet. So now I'm looking at the back of that row where I made my increases. And I'm just going to go a few stitches in again. Okay, so now I want to have fewer stitches. I changed my mind. So what I'll do to decrease is I will go into the next stitch and pull up my loop, but then instead of finishing that stitch like I would normally, I'm going to go into the next stitch and pull up a loop. So now you can see I have my loop on my hook, and then I have a loop coming out of this stitch and a loop coming out of this stitch. And now I'm just going to grab my yarn and I'm going to pull through all 3 of those loops. So that takes 2 stitches and makes them into just a single stitch on the top there. So I'm going to go over a few and do that again. Straighten my yarn out here. All right, so I'm going to do this again. I've got my loop on the hook. I'm going to go into the next stitch, pull up a loop, go into the next stitch, and pull up a loop. Got my 3 loops. I'll grab my yarn and pull through all 3. I'll go over a couple and do that one more time. So into the next stitch, pull up a loop, next one over yet again, pull up a loop, grab my yarn, pull through all 3. And I'll finish my row here, turn around, and now you can see I've got kind of my rectangle shape back because we did increase our stitches, but then we took them away again. So it's starting to even out its shape. Although you could definitely see there's some wibbliness to it where we did those increases and then decreases. But overall, it's not doing the rainbow thing anymore because we've evened out our stitches. So now I'm going to show you double crochet. So let me go a few stitches in here, working some double crochets across the top of my previous row. So just like increasing in single crochet, in double crochet we're going to work 2 stitches into the same stitch. So there's my next stitch right there. I'm going to work my double crochet, which there's instructions for in the first video if you want a refresher. All right, now I can see my stitch coming out of that space there. Gonna yarn over and do my other second double crochet in that same space. So now you can see got 2 stitches coming out of that one same space there. So I'll go over a couple and I'll do that again. So work 1 stitch into that space, and then I'm going to find that same space again and work a second stitch into that space. I'll go ahead and finish my row. All right, so I only increased 2 stitches, but you can see already it is starting to rainbow again. You can kind of find your increases in the pattern there, and right there. Once you learn how to kind of read your stitches and read your work, you can spot them, which is handy if you're following a pattern and it tells you to increase so many stitches across the row and you lose count. You need to go back and see, okay, there's one. So just seeing where that little kind of creates a V shape coming out of a single stitch. And sometimes that stitch will be a little bit more open than the ones around it because it's holding 2 stitches instead of just 1. So that's increasing in double crochet. Now I'll show you how to decrease in double crochet. Just go a couple stitches in again. All right, so changed my mind. I don't want any extra stitches, so I'm going to do a decrease. Now a double crochet decrease is The same principle as a single crochet decrease, but we're always going to do the decrease part on the last step of the stitch. So I'm going to do my yarn over for double crochet, insert my hook in the next stitch, pull up a loop, but instead of just stopping there for double crochet, I'm going to grab my yarn and pull through 2 just one time. Normally then to finish your double crochet, you'd pull through 2 again, but I'm going to stop right there and hold those 2 on my hook. Then I'm going to yarn over again and go into the next stitch, grab my yarn, bring it up, bring through 2. So you can see here I have my previous stitch with my loop on the hook. I have half a stitch with a loop on the hook. And again, in the next stitch, I have half a stitch with a loop on the hook. So then what I'm going to do is grab my yarn and pull through all 3 of those loops. And that takes these 2 stitches here at the top only have 1 top to them. They've been combined. So I'm going to go a few stitches over and show you that again, because that one's a little tricky, a few extra steps in there. And it would be the same thing if you were decreasing in treble crochet. You would create most of your stitch, but then stop just at that last step, that last pull through. So I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook in the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, and then leave it at that. Go to my next stitch over, yarn over, insert in that stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. And now I've got my 2 half stitches there that I'm going to combine by pulling through all at once there. So that decreases a stitch and reduces your stitch count by 1 every single time you do that. So we've done that twice to balance out the 2 increases we did on the previous row. So I'm just finishing out my row here. So back to being a rectangle. You can see if you look in your work, you can find those decreases because they'll be slanted towards each other just slightly. They look like little pointed hats in there. But this is a nearly invisible decrease. So your work still looks solid, but you've reduced your stitch count. So I will show you the treble crochet one real quick, just because there's lots of loops involved. So for treble crochet, I'm going to yarn over 2 times and work my stitch over 2, over 2, over 2. It's a very tall stitch. Great for blankets or nice thick scarves. Oops, started double crochet. So I'm going to go in a couple stitches in treble crochet. So if I were increasing, I would do the same thing. Again, I would just work 2 stitches into the same stitch to increase my stitch count. But for decreasing in treble crochet, I'm going to go ahead and start my stitch, yarn over 2 times, insert in the next stitch, pull up a loop. So I have my 4 loops on my hook. I'm going to pull through 2 and through 2 again and just leave that last one on there. Yarn over 2 times, insert my hook into the next stitch, pull up my loop, pull through 2, pull through 2. So then I have my working loop and then 2 incomplete stitches, and I would yarn over and pull through that. And you can kind of see that little pointy hat a little clearer in those very tall stitches because they're going to lean a little more visibly. But that's how you would decrease in treble crochet. So there we go. That is increasing and decreasing. And we will use those in our next video, which is going to be working in the round. I'm going to show you how to start the top of a hat, or even just, we're going to make a quick hat. Hats are nice, fast patterns. We'll probably be working in single crochet, and I'll show you 2 different ways to start the top of your hat to work in the round, and how to create an increase pattern and count your stitches. So thanks for joining me. I will see you in part 4.